This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Dell Inspiron 15. This is the UHD 4K edition, a fairly new entry into the Inspiron 15 line. Now, there's two Inspiron 15s. There's the traditional one like this, which is a laptop and a laptop only. It does have a touchscreen, obviously that 4K display, nice thin light design, but there's also the two-in-one version of the Inspiron 15, and that's pretty much just the bigger version of the Inspiron 13 7000 series that we reviewed not too long ago. So if you're interested in that, pretty much look at the Inspiron 13 2-in-1 and you get the idea there. So this 7000 series machine has Intel 5th generation CPUs inside, dedicated graphics, at 4K display. We're going to look at it now. So this is the Dell Inspiron 15. There's a series that's been around for a while. This is the latest edition with Intel 5th generation CPUs, part of the Dell Inspiron 15 7000 lines. Particularly, this is the 7548 model, and this is the high-end model, $1,449 with a UHD 4K display, which is the new thing for the Inspiron line, going up to the 4K. So you don't have to go to the XPS 15 anymore if you really want that 4K display. And obviously you're going to be saving about $600 or so by going with this instead of the XPS 15. But there's differences between them, and we'll talk about that. It's significant. Now, if you want to get a little more basic with this, and there's nothing wrong with that, in fact, I might actually lean towards that as a better value leader. If you have to have the 4K display, the least you can spend is $1,100 on it. And that omits the SSD. We have a 256 gig SSD in here and 16 gigs of RAM rather than 8 gigs. And we'll talk more about all the configuration options and what you can upgrade yourself later on as well. It starts at $680. You get a Core i5, 6 gigs of RAM, and a terabyte conventional hard drive in there, and a 1080p IPS display. Now that's a pretty nice configuration for that price, and I would find that pretty tempting. You go up to $800, you get the Core i7, 8 gigs of RAM. This is a ULV Ultrabook 15-watt CPU in here. They're all dual core. There's not a huge difference between the Core i5 and the Core i7. This is not the quad core powerhouse that you'll find in the XPS 15 or in the Asus ZenBook Pro UX501 we recently viewed, or in the HP Omen 15. So different sort of animal here. It might look a lot like those, but it is not quite the same. It's got Ultrabook stuff going on. Now, one thing that is interesting, you can get this with Intel HD 5500 graphics, and if you move up to that $1,100 or better model, you can get this with AMD Radeon graphics. This one has the AMD Radeon R7 M270 graphics with 4 gigs of DDR3, not DDR5, VRAM. That is an interesting proposition here, and again, I'm not really sure it's worth the money because that's at the low end of dedicated graphics. It's sort of like the NVIDIA 830M. It's really not going to do a whole lot for you for gaming, and you know, that is what it is. So once again, I'm leaning towards lower end configurations of what we have here. No matter which you get, you're going to get a really nice, what Dell calls a forged aluminum. Well, it's an aluminum casing. Aluminum right here, aluminum on the bottom. Good looking machine, high quality. So if you're looking for something that looks good at work, you know, in the boardroom, as they say, this is certainly nice looking. I like the design style. I like the taper that they've got going on here. And you can see the port selection is pretty healthy. That's where your charger goes. And it's a 65-watt charger that's not very big. Since this just has an Ultrabook CPU inside and low-end graphics, it doesn't need one of those giant chargers that the bigger, more gaming-oriented or pro apps-oriented laptops would have. So that's something in favor of this for somebody who wants something more portable. Say you're buying this for school, for example. You'd love to have a super powerful machine, but you just don't want to be dragging all that power around. Full-size HDMI port right here. We have USB 3.0 port, our usual combo audio jack. You got indicator lights on the front right here. There's a little LED that lets you know when the machine is sleeping. And on this side we have the SD card slot, a USB 3.0 port, a USB 2.0 port, so 3 USB ports total, and your lock slot right there. Since this is not the 360-degree rotating model, you have a kind of more standard hinge design back here. And the bottom is thrillingly very easy to take off. Now, nominally the battery is sealed inside, which is true of all these Ultrabook designs, But all you have is Phillips head screws here, and this little rubber foot's just a rubber foot. There's nothing hiding under there. So you just undo the Phillips head screws, work your way around the little snaps on the case, and you have access to the 2.5-inch drive bay, which you can get with either a conventional hard drive or an SSD drive from the factory. It's very easy to upgrade yourself, that sort of hardware. There are 2 RAM slots, so that's why you have a maximum of 16 gigs to 8 gig DIMMs, and the usual socketed Wi-Fi card. And we'll splice in the picture of the internal so you can see for yourself. And there's 2 fans, one for the CPU, one for the dedicated graphics, and the battery lives in this section over here, as it would on most laptops. Battery is 58 watt hour. This is 4-cell battery. That's not a huge capacity battery, especially for a machine this big. But then again, as I mentioned, Ultrabook internals, Dell claims up to 8-hour run times, and that's for our model, the switchable dedicated graphics here. We're seeing more like 6 to 6.5, which compared to something like, well, say the Asus ZenBook Pro UX 501, which is the same price we just reviewed, that's noticeably better. That's about 2 hours better, in fact. It's better than the HP Omen 15 in terms of run times. Now, the XPS 15 is not bad at all for run times, but still, this one I'm finding about a half an hour to an hour longer than the XPS 15. Of course, the XPS 15 has a quad-core full mobile CPU, and they're not a 15-watt CPU, much higher wattage CPU, and it has, granted it's dated, but it's still more powerful NVIDIA 750M graphics inside. Now, opening up to look inside, it's still attractive looking. We have the darker surface right here. It's not the kind of rubbery finish that you have on the XPS 15, but it's not super slick either. Trackpad is pretty large, and this is one of the standard basic Microsoft driver or precision trackpads. It's not my favorite, I tell you. It just, it's not hideous, it's not jumpy, it's not freaky, but it's just kind of not the most responsive, precise trackpad in the world. Backlit keyboard, on the other hand, nice travel on this, given that it's an Ultrabook. Backlighting is very even on this. One could say that they could have made this area even larger and extended out to the side. Well, they didn't, but it's fine. It's adequate enough, and if you're used to a 13-inch machine, it's going to feel pretty much the same size as that. And I think even if you're used to a bigger machine, you can adjust it. Granted, this is no ThinkPad keyboard, but it's certainly very usable and, well, better than the trackpad. That's just okay. Looking up at the display, this is, again, it's the 4K model, and our video camera may even try to correct the color balance a little bit, but this is a Samsung 4K resolution panel that's 3840 by 2160, and as sadly is the case with some Samsung 4K panels, it has yellows that verge towards a little looking muddy or a little bit green, and yeah, our daisy should look kind of like, rather our sunflower should look like a warmer yellow than it does. But it's not the end of the world. If you're a graphics professional, though, looking to get a 4K on the cheap, keep it in mind. The color gamut on this display isn't bad at all. It's 94% of sRGB and 73% of Adobe RGB. So that's pretty close to being up there with the better display panels. Color accuracy and calibration, not super great out of the box, but that's certainly correctable, other than the yellows, which you can never quite correct. SpongeBob will always look a little green around the gills. Brightness is decent, but not great at 244 nits. So by no means is it a bad display, but it is not a pro-level display. If you're just buying this for your own personal enjoyment, for schoolwork, for work, that sort of thing, it's absolutely fine. Okay, if you notice colors, then you'll notice probably the yellows are not quite perfect there, but overall it's enjoyable, it's colorful, it's saturated, the contrast is pretty good, and as you can tell, it's a glossy screen, so it's got reflections aplenty. This is a touch screen, which is very handy for using Windows 8.1, and it'll still be handy for Windows 10. This does not support the pen, the non-2-in-1 design one, the one that doesn't rotate 360 degrees to turn it into a tablet, so you get fingers only with this, but not pen input. And honestly, if you're going to be using a pen on something this big, you probably do want to be able to flip it around, because that's a lot of reaching to go to work with a display with a pen. So have a benchmark performance. So remember, this is a funny little hybrid of a machine, because you have an Ultrabook 15-watt CPU in here, no 47-watt quad-core powerhouse, And you have switchable dedicated graphics, but it's low-end AMD R7 M270 graphics. So here in PC Mark 8, which actually does make use of the GPU, you can see our result there, 2913, which is not a bad result, actually. It's not up there with the quad-core powerhouses, but it's certainly better than, say, the XPS 13. And if we take a look at 3D Mark, wondering how that GPU might do, here we have Ice Storm Unlimited, which relatively speaking is a fairly easy test for PCs. It's a cross-platform test. You can also run on iOS and Android products, and it scored 78,135. Now for the more demanding CloudGate test, it scored 5,894. That's about 1/3 of something with, say, the NVIDIA 960M in terms of speed. And indeed, the graphics in this are enough to give you a little extra punch if you're doing something like playing Skyrim or Diablo 3. You can play Diablo 3 at 1080p resolution. Mind you, this is the 4K display here. Forget 4K gaming. It doesn't have the horsepower for that. And if you want to play something like Battlefield 4 or Dragon Age, the latest Dragon Age game, this does not have the graphics horsepower to really do that. Anything other than the low settings and say 1024 by 768 resolution, if you can get it to run full screen, because that takes a lot of work. When you have a 4K display here, these days games know that. So when you choose a low resolution, it runs it in a teeny window, so then you have to run it in window mode instead and stretch it out, which actually degrades performance a little bit. You getting the idea? This is not really a gaming laptop, but it's got enough graphics oomph to give you a little extra help, say, when you're doing a little video editing for fun, especially if you want to work with, say, 4K footage, something like that, that's high resolution. Yeah. For W Prime, it computed Pi in 16.9 seconds, which is about what we'd expect for a Core i7 Ultrabook CPU. Geekbench 3, it scored 3079 for the single core, and multi-core 6337. That's a little bit better than the XPS 13. So how about heat and noise? Well, the fan actually just did kick in a minute ago, and this is one of those fans you're going to hear. It's not really high-pitched, but it's a little high-pitched for a 15-inch laptop, and it probably will kick on again maybe when we're playing some video so you can hear the speakers and see how video looks on this, and it's like a kind of fan noise. Also, I don't know what it is, but every once in a while I hear a little, only when it's plugged in, and this doesn't sound like the keyboard coil whine that Dell used to have. It sounds like something different, but there's like a little bit of a not that loud, just a little bit. You'll hear it like there's a little mosquito trapped in this section right over here. Not sure what it is. Those of you who are sensitive to such things will probably be driven crazy if you get one and it does it too. Other people will probably never notice it. There it is. So this is our web browser set at 200% zooming, just like our desktop is set, because this is a 4K display, and if everything was just at 100%, i.e. no scaling, it would all be too tiny to see. Let's play our Windows 10 walkthrough video, Mobile Tech Review, and you can see and hear speakers are at 68% right now. This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is Windows 10. This is the final version here. Those of us who were in the Windows Insider program got to try it out early, and we're getting the final build about 2 weeks before the rest of the world will be able to get it on July 29th. Now I brought it up to 96% Windows 10 a couple of volume, and it actually did just fine there. It really didn't distort. I mean, they're not super quality speakers. They're a little annoying when you bring them up to 96%, but overall pretty loud and pretty clear, and I've muted it now to see if the fan will come on so you can hear it, but most of the time actually the fan won't come on unless you're playing gaming, if you're exporting full HD or 4K video. Otherwise, it's a pretty silent machine, and it doesn't really get too hot to touch on the bottom, despite the fact that the bottom panel is aluminum. Now, if you're playing games, if you are playing Skyrim on this, you will hear the fan, and the bottom will reach just above human body temperature, so it's going to feel warm, but it's not enough to fry the hairs off your leg. Inside we have Intel dual band 7265 Wi-Fi AC. That's the latest chip from Intel. It's a good Wi-Fi chip. Wi-Fi behaves nicely on here. We also have Bluetooth 4.0. So it's a well-appointed machine. It's a very classy looking machine. It's a well-built machine. And if you're a fan of Dell products, well, certainly it's an attractive enough proposition. Again, at the high end, I'm a little tempted by the ones with the quad cores, but some of you don't need that kind of processing power. Exactly, those of you who are doing back to school and you're not doing like seriously heavy fourth-year engineering projects or something like that, then you'd probably be happy with the dual-core CPU in here and a little extra graphics oomph that the AMD is going to give you. And once again, one thing that dual-core is going to bring you is quieter, cooler operation and a bit longer battery life, something that the quad-core machines can't do for you. So there it is, the latest Inspiron and the first 15-inch 4K UHD model available from Dell. So that's the Dell Inspiron 15, the 7000 series. It's available now, and again, if I was looking at this, I would be more tempted by the lower end models, $1,000 or less, and there you get a very stylish, well-built machine for the price, certainly with fit and finish and some creature comforts like a backlit keyboard that you won't always find on the competition. But if you're looking at the high end, like this guy right here, unless you really have your heart set on must-have 4K display, there are other options with a lot more horsepower inside. Not always better battery life, as we mentioned, but there's competition out there. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our YouTube channel.